There's a kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. I'm not talking about the kind where you close your eyes and wake up 8 hours later feeling human again. I'm talking about the kind that lives in your chest. The kind where you get up at 4:47 in the morning, not because an alarm went off, but because some part of your body stopped believing rest was something you were allowed to have. That was my life for the better part of 3 years. My wife, Beverly, was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease when she was 61. Not the slow, manageable kind you read about in pamphlets. Hers moved fast. By the second year, she needed help with buttons, with stairs, with remembering whether she'd taken her medication. By the third year, she needed help with most things. And I was the one who was there. We'd been married 34 years. We met at a company picnic in Raleigh in 1989, both of us pretending we weren't bored by the speeches, both of us gravitating toward the dessert table at the exact same moment. She laughed at something I said, I don't even remember what, and I thought, that's a person I want to make laugh for the rest of my life. And I did, mostly. We raised 2 kids in a 3-bedroom house off Glenwood Avenue. Took the same 2-week vacation to the Outer Banks every summer, argued about the thermostat, disagreed about whether the back fence needed replacing. Ordinary life. Good life. When she got sick, everything shifted in the way that things shift when the ground underneath you changes shape. You don't fall, you just constantly adjust your balance. I retired early from my job as a civil engineer at 59, 2 years before I planned, because the logistics of caregiving and a full-time job had become impossible to manage simultaneously. We had savings, $362,000 in a retirement account I'd been building since my early 30s, plus the equity in our house. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for Beverly's care, for whatever came next, for some version of a quiet life on the other side of all this. Our son, Nathan, lived 40 minutes away in Cary. He called every Sunday, visited maybe once a month, brought takeout sometimes. Thai food, which Beverly had always loved and could still enjoy on her better days. He was a good son. I believed that completely. I had no reason not to. He started coming around more after Beverly's second fall. Nothing serious. She caught herself on the kitchen counter, but it shook her, and it shook me, and Nathan showed up 2 days later with what I can only describe as a plan. He sat across from me at the kitchen table with a folder, an actual folder, like he'd been preparing for this meeting. "Dad," he said, "I've been thinking about this a lot, and I want to help you. For real. Not just Sunday calls." He meant the finances, the insurance, the medical billing that had become a part-time job in itself. He'd done his research, knew the names of Beverly's doctors, knew roughly what her prescriptions cost, knew that I'd been spending hours every week on the phone with insurance companies trying to get things covered. "You're carrying too much," he said. "Let me take some of this." I sat there and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt like someone was reaching down and offering me a hand. "I'm not asking to take over," he said. "I just want to help manage the financial side. Pay the bills, handle the insurance calls. You focus on Mom." It sounded like love. It looked like love. The folder was full of typed notes, organized tabs, questions he'd written down. I thought, this is my son, and he's showing up. I signed the paperwork he brought the following week. Power of attorney for finances. He explained it carefully. Told me it just meant he could act on my behalf with banks and insurance companies, so I didn't have to be on every call. I asked if Beverly needed to sign anything. He said no, that since I was the primary account holder, my signature was what mattered. The notary came to the house. A woman Nathan knew, apparently. She was there for maybe 15 minutes. I signed where she pointed. Beverly was resting in the other room. I thought about calling her out to meet the woman and decided against it. She'd had a rough morning. That was a Thursday in March. For the first few months, I'll be honest. It felt like relief. Nathan handled the insurance calls. The bills got paid on time. He set up automatic transfers, he said, to make everything more efficient. I stopped dreading the mail. I started sleeping a little better. I focused on Beverly, on her physical therapy appointments, on finding a neurologist at UNC who specialized in her stage of the disease. I didn't look at the accounts. That's the sentence I come back to over and over. I didn't look. I had online banking. I had the app on my phone. I just didn't open it. Why would I? That was Nathan's job now. That was the whole point. Beverly had a good stretch that summer. She was steadier on her feet, more communicative, enjoyed sitting on the back porch in the evenings while I grilled. Some nights she'd say something funny and we'd both laugh, and for a few minutes it felt like the old kitchen table, the old arguments about the fence, the old ordinary life. Our daughter Meg lives in Portland. She calls less than Nathan did, not because she loves Beverly less, but because distance makes people feel helpless, and helpless people sometimes go quiet. She visited in August that year, and she and Nathan had dinner together while I stayed with Beverly. She texted me later that night. Had a really good talk with Nate. He seems really on top of things. I replied, he's been a big help. And I meant it. The Sunday dinner in October started the way they all did. Nathan brought food, barbecue this time, from a place on Wade Avenue that Beverly had been asking about for months. My neighbor Gordon was there with his wife Ellen. We'd been friends with Gordon and Ellen for over 20 years. Our kids had played in each other's yards. We'd helped each other through things that neighbors help each other through. Gordon is a quiet man, retired from the postal service, fixes things in his garage on weekends, not the kind of person who makes a fuss. Which is why when he pressed his phone across the table toward me while Nathan was in the kitchen getting plates, I noticed. He'd typed it in his notes app, not a text. A note. Check your account. I saw something. Call me tomorrow morning and don't mention it tonight. I looked up at him. He looked up at him. He looked back. Not dramatic, not wide-eyed. Just steady. The way Gordon does everything. I put his phone down and sat with that note in my head for the rest of the meal. Nathan came back with plates. Beverly asked him about work. He answered. I watched him the way you watch someone when you've been handed a sentence you don't fully understand yet. After they left. After I'd helped Beverly to bed, after I'd stood in the kitchen for 10 minutes pretending to clean up, I opened the banking app. The retirement account had $41,000 in it. I opened it again. I closed it. I opened it again. $41,000. I sat down on the floor of the kitchen. I'm not sure why. I just needed to be lower than I was. I pulled up the transaction history. Withdrawals going back 14 months. Steady, regular, some large, some small. $8,000 here, $3,500 here. Dozens of them. A $22,000 transfer in June that I had no memory of authorizing. Insurance payments that looked correct until I cross-referenced them with the actual bills and realized they were double what they should have been. Over $320,000. Gone. I called Gordon at 6:15 the next morning. He told me he'd been at a retirement seminar at his credit union, the kind of thing they offer for free to members, and had ended up talking to a woman named Elaine who worked in their fraud prevention department. They'd gotten to talking about elder financial abuse, which he'd later told me was more common than most people knew. She'd said something that stuck with him. The warning sign isn't always someone asking for money. It's someone insisting on handling it for you. He hadn't wanted to believe it. He'd known Nathan since Nathan was 9 years old. For 2 weeks before that Sunday dinner, he'd been getting his car serviced at the shop on Hillsborough Street, and Nathan's car had been parked outside a financial advisory office that Gordon knew handled private wealth transfers. He'd noticed because Nathan had mentioned money twice in recent conversations in a way that felt off. Casual mentions of a new investment, a property deal in Wilmington he was looking at. Gordon hadn't said anything because he didn't know anything. He just felt something. I've thought a lot about what it means that my neighbor is the one who handed me that note and not someone in my own family. Gordon didn't have to do it. It would have been easier not to. He did it because that's who Gordon is, and because some people still believe that looking out for someone is a thing you do even when it costs you something. I called a lawyer that afternoon, an elder law attorney out of Durham that my own doctor had once mentioned. Her name had been in my phone for over a year, unused. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. At the end, she said, "The first thing we need to do is determine the status of that power of attorney document." It took 3 days to get the answer. The notary who'd come to the house, the woman Nathan knew, had not witnessed the signatures at the time of signing. She'd notarized documents that had already been signed before she arrived. That's not legal, A notary exists specifically to verify that signatures happen in their presence, that the person signing understands what they're signing and is doing so voluntarily. None of that had happened. Beverly hadn't been present at all. The document was fraudulent. My attorney filed a report with the North Carolina Secretary of State's office and with local law enforcement. A financial crimes detective was assigned to the case. They subpoenaed Nathan's bank records. What they found was not a son in crisis who borrowed money he intended to return. It was a pattern. Over 14 months, Nathan had transferred funds into 2 accounts in his name, one of which had been used to make a $47,000 down payment on a rental property in Wilmington. He paid off a personal loan. He'd funded what his bank records described as investment activity that appeared to be day trading. He'd taken his girlfriend to Cancun in July, while I was measuring Beverly's medication every morning and driving her to appointments and learning to help her with things no one should need help with at 61 years old. He was in Cancun. I didn't call him. I didn't have a confrontation at the door, no screaming match, no moment where I asked him to explain himself and he crumbled and apologized. My attorney told me not to contact him at all once the investigation began, and I followed that instruction with both hands. The hardest part, and I want to be honest about this because I think honesty is the only thing that makes any of this worth telling. The hardest part was not the money. The money was devastating. The money meant Beverly's care was at risk, meant the memory care facility we'd been evaluating at $9,800 a month was no longer a real option without significant help, meant my retirement had been gutted by the person I'd handed the keys to. But the money wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was remembering every Sunday dinner. Every time he'd carried Beverly's plate to the table, every time he called just to check in, every time I thought, I'm lucky, my son shows up. Some people's kids don't show up, and mine does. He showed up. He just wasn't there for the reasons I thought. Meg flew in from Portland when I told her. She sat at the kitchen table where Nathan had once sat with his folder and his organized tabs, and she cried in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. Not just for the money, for her mother. For the fact that her brother had looked at her mother's illness and seen an opportunity. How do we fix this? She kept asking. We fixed it the slow way, the hard way. My attorney negotiated with the court to freeze Nathan's assets while the criminal investigation proceeded. The rental property in Wilmington was eventually identified as purchased with stolen funds and became part of the restitution picture. It took 8 months. Nathan was charged with financial exploitation of an older adult, a Class F felony in North Carolina, and with forgery related to the power of attorney documents. His attorney tried to characterize it as a family misunderstanding, as informal borrowing, as well-intentioned management that got out of hand. The detective who'd worked the case told me in a parking lot outside the courthouse on a cold February morning that this was one of the cleaner cases she'd seen in terms of documentation. The transaction records were clear. The fraudulent notarization was clear. Nathan hadn't hidden it very well, possibly because he'd assumed I'd never look. He was right that I hadn't looked. He was wrong that I never would. I want to say something here about trust, because I think about it differently now than I did before. Trust is not a character flaw. Trusting your son is not stupidity. Choosing to believe that someone who says they love you actually loves you is not a mistake you made. It's a decision you made from a place of hope, and hope is not something to be ashamed of. What happened to me happens to hundreds of thousands of older adults in this country every year. The National Council on Aging estimates that financial abuse costs seniors over $3 billion annually, and that in the majority of cases, the perpetrator is a family member, not a stranger at the door with a scam. Someone at the table, someone who knows your medication schedule and your account numbers and which days you're too tired to pay attention. Beverly is in a memory care facility now. A good one in Chapel Hill, about 22 minutes from the house. I found a different way to pay for it. Medicaid planning, which my attorney helped me navigate, and a small long-term care policy Beverly had taken out years ago that I'd forgotten about until we went through every document in the house. It covers $1,400 a month. The facility is $8,900 a month. The facility is $8,900. The gap is real, but manageable at least for now. I drive there every morning. I bring her coffee from the place she likes on Franklin Street. Decaf now, because of her medication. But she holds the cup the same way she always has, with both hands close to her face. Some mornings she knows me right away. Some mornings it takes a few minutes. Some mornings I sit next to her and tell her about the back fence which I finally replaced last spring, and she smiles in a way that makes me think some part of her is still listening. Gordon came with me last week. He sat across from her and told her the story of the time our dogs got loose at the same moment and ended up 3 blocks away sitting on someone's porch together like they planned it. Beverly laughed, actually laughed. I looked at Gordon and I thought, this man is family. Nathan's case is pending sentencing. I was asked if I wanted to submit a victim impact statement. I spent 2 weeks thinking about it, and then I wrote one. Not to be cruel, not for revenge. Because the court asked, and because I decided a long time ago that silence is not the same as peace. Before I close, I want to say something directly to you, because this story is not just about me. If you have a spouse who is ill, if you are the one managing everything, if someone in your life, a son, a daughter, a sibling, a person you love and trust, has offered to help handle the finances, I'm not telling you to say no. I'm telling you to stay in the room. Keep your name on the accounts. Review the statements yourself every month. Use a financial power of attorney only after consulting an independent elder law attorney, not one recommended by the person being given the authority. A legitimate POA is signed in front of a notary who witnesses the signature in real time, who asks questions, who makes sure you understand what you're handing over. Set up account alerts on your phone. Every transaction over a threshold you choose, $50, $100, can trigger a notification. It takes 10 minutes to set up. It takes a lot more than 10 minutes to recover from not having done it. If something feels off, if the statements don't match, if someone is vague about amounts, if you find yourself being gently discouraged from looking at your own money, trust that feeling. It's not paranoia, it's information. Talk to your local area agency on aging. They have resources for exactly this situation, free of charge, no appointment required in most cases. The Adult Protective Services Office in your county handles financial abuse reports and can act quickly when the situation warrants it. You worked for that money. You saved it for a reason. You're allowed to protect it. Beverly lifted her hand this morning when I walked in. Not a wave exactly, just a lift, a recognition, a small motion that means I see you. I see you too. I'll see you in the next one. I've spent a lot of time since all of this happened trying to understand how a person arrives at the decision Nathan made. Not to excuse it, just to understand it, because I think understanding it is the only way to make sure you don't accidentally build the same trap for yourself or hand someone else the key to it. Here's what I've come to believe. The people who hurt us the most are rarely strangers. They're the ones who learned our habits, who knew which mornings were hard and which days I was too tired to look at paperwork. Nathan didn't steal from a stranger. He stole from a man he'd watched age, from a man he'd watched slow down and soften and ask for less. He chose his moment carefully, and his moment was my vulnerability. That's not an accident. That's a decision made over and over, one transaction at a time. And I made decisions too. I decided that trust was a gift I could give without keeping any receipt. I decided that love meant stepping back. I decided that love meant stepping back. I decided that needing help was the same as surrendering oversight. None of those decisions were stupid. They came from a good place. But good intentions don't protect your bank account, and love doesn't cancel out the need to stay informed about your own life. What I carry now, not as a wound, but as a kind of hard-earned clarity, is this: the most important thing a person can protect isn't money. It's the ability to see clearly. The moment you hand over your ability to verify, to question, to look at the numbers yourself, you haven't just delegated a task. You handed someone the power to rewrite your reality without your knowledge. And by the time you notice, months have passed, sometimes years. Gordon didn't save me because he was smarter than me. He saved me because he kept paying attention when I'd stopped. That's not a criticism of myself. I was exhausted. I was caring for Beverly 7 days a week while also grieving the version of our life that Parkinson's had taken. There was very little left over. But exhaustion, I've learned, is exactly when the people who mean to take advantage of you move. They count on it. The thing about integrity, real integrity, not the version people put in LinkedIn bios, is that it holds even when no one is watching. Nathan knew I wasn't watching. He built his plan around that fact. And what that tells me is that the character a person shows you when they think you're paying attention is not always the character they carry. Watch what people do when they think the lights are off. Beverly lifted her hand this morning when I came through the door. That small motion, that recognition is worth more to me than any account balance. I didn't lose everything. I lost money, and I lost the version of my son I thought I knew. What I found on the other side of that loss was Gordon and Meg and my own capacity to rebuild something from less than I'd planned on. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot. I'll see you in the next one.